The current grabbed Petty Officer Second Class Dawson and dragged him under like a hand from hell. One moment he was treading water during the combat diver qualification exercise. The next he was gone, pulled down by the riptide that had formed without warning near the training platform. 12 operators watched from the surface. 11 of them froze. Chief Petty Officer Yemisi Adeyemi was already diving. She knifed through the water without hesitation, without gear, without the safety line that protocol demanded. The Pacific swallowed her whole, and she welcomed it like an old friend, even as the cold seized her muscles and the pressure built behind her eyes. Dawson was 15 feet down and sinking, his movements weak and panicked, bubbles streaming from his mouth in a silver cascade that meant he was running out of time. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed someone prove their doubters wrong where you are. Yemisi caught him at 20 feet. Her lungs burned, but her mind stayed quiet, the way her father had taught her in the waters off Lagos before she understood what drowning really meant. She hooked her arm under Dawson's chest and kicked, driving them both toward the light above. The current fought her. She fought harder. They broke the surface together, Dawson coughing and gasping, Yemisi already scanning for the safety boat. It arrived 30 seconds later, hands reaching down to haul them both aboard, and only then did she allow herself to breathe deeply, to feel the trembling in her legs that she had refused to acknowledge underwater. Master Chief Donovan Creel wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders. His weathered face showed something that might have been pride, though he was too old and too Navy to say it directly. Adeyemi, he said, that was either the bravest thing I've seen this year or the stupidest. Yemisi wiped salt water from her eyes. Dawson is alive, Master Chief. That is all that matters. Creel studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Your father would have done the same thing, he said quietly. That man never could resist a drowning soul. She touched the knife at her belt without thinking, the worn handle that still smelled of fishing nets and Lagos Harbor, even after 16 years. The blade her father had carried until the day the ocean took him. Some inheritances were heavier than others. The debrief lasted 2 hours. Lieutenant Commander Elise Thorne praised the rescue officially while noting the protocol violations for the record. The other operators offered handshakes and shoulder slaps, the quiet respect of men and women who understood what it meant to risk everything for a teammate. Dawson himself could barely speak, his voice hoarse from swallowed seawater, but his eyes said enough. Not everyone was impressed. Senior Chief Brandon Holt stood apart from the group, arms crossed, watching Yemisi with an expression she had learned to recognize over the past 18 months. Disdain wrapped in professional courtesy, doubt dressed up as concern for unit readiness. He waited until the others had dispersed before approaching. Quite a show out there, Adeyemi, he said. His voice carried the flat effect of a man delivering criticism he had rehearsed. Reckless, though. You could have gotten yourself killed. Dawson would have died, she replied evenly. Holt shrugged. Safety divers were responding. Proper protocol would have handled it. Proper protocol was 30 seconds too slow. Something flickered behind Holt's eyes. He was a decorated operator, 15 years in special warfare, chest full of ribbons, and a reputation built on missions that would never appear in any official record. He was also the man who had argued against her assignment to this unit, who had questioned her qualifications in briefings, who had made it clear in a dozen small ways that he believed women had no place in the world he inhabited. Tomorrow's briefing, he said, changing subjects. 0600. Command is putting together a task force for something significant. He paused, and she could see him weighing his next words. Try not to do anything theatrical between now and then. Some of us take these operations seriously. He walked away before she could respond, which was probably intentional. Yemisi watched him go, feeling the familiar heat in her chest that came with swallowing words she wanted to say. 18 months of proving herself. 18 months of being the only woman in a unit of 40 operators. 18 months of being held to a standard that shifted every time she met it. Creel appeared beside her. Do not let him get to you, he said. I'm not, she lied. The old Master Chief chuckled. You are a terrible liar, Adeyemi. Always have been. He glanced toward where Holt had disappeared. He's got his reasons for being the way he is. Does not make it right, but reasons exist. What reasons? Creel's expression closed off. Not my story to tell. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to matter. That night, alone in her quarters, Yemisi held her father's knife and tried to sleep. The mission briefing waited 16 hours away. Senior Chief Holt waited with his doubts and his reasons. The ocean waited, as it always did, patient and dark and full of secrets. She dreamed of black water closing over her head and woke uncertain whether it had been nightmare or homecoming. The briefing room fell silent when Commander Thorne activated the display screen. 40 operators sat in rows of metal chairs, coffee cooling in paper cups, eyes fixed on the satellite imagery that materialized before them. An island, small, rocky, surrounded by water so dark it looked like spilled ink, even from orbit. This is Croth Island, Thorne said. Officially, it does not exist. Unofficially, it houses one of the most sophisticated signals intelligence operations we have ever identified. For the past 18 months, this facility has been intercepting and decrypting Allied communications across 3 theaters of operation. Last week, they cracked a cipher we thought was unbreakable. People are dying because of what happens on this rock. Yemisi studied the imagery, noting the fortified structures, the patrol boat routes marked in red, the generator buildings that suggested serious infrastructure. This was not some improvised outpost. Someone had invested significant resources in making this island a fortress. Commander Thorne continued. Joint Task Force is being assembled. Navy, Marine raiders, agency assets. Primary objective is total destruction of their SIGINT capability. Secondary objective is capture of intelligence materials. She paused. Tertiary objective, if circumstances permit, is the neutralization of the facility commander. Colonel Kasim Volkov, former Russian Spetsnaz, currently freelancing for the highest bidder. A photograph replaced the satellite image. Volkov had the face of a man who had seen terrible things and decided to become one of them. Cold eyes, scarred jaw, the kind of stillness that came from absolute certainty in one's own lethality. Holt raised his hand. Insertion options? Thorne nodded toward him. Senior Chief, Holt will be leading the primary assault element. Helicopter insertion on the northern approach, fast rope onto the facility roof. Simultaneous strikes on communications array and generator complex. Yemisi watched Holt accept this with a small nod, unsurprised. Of course he would lead. Of course the glory assignment would go to him and his chosen operators. What about the water approach? Someone asked from the back of the room. Thorne's expression tightened. The water approach is not viable. She clicked to a new display showing the ocean surrounding the island. Sonar net grid here, and here. Patrol boat rotation every 15 minutes. Thermal sensors along the dock. And this. She highlighted a section of water near the island's southern shore. Warm water outflow from the generators attracts a resident population of oceanic white-tip sharks. Aggressive feeders, especially at night. A murmur rippled through the room. Yemisi said nothing, but her mind was already working, already tracing routes through the obstacles, calculating timing windows and current patterns. The briefing continued for another hour. Team assignments were distributed. Yemisi found her name on the support roster, assigned to the boat element that would wait offshore during the assault, ready to extract the primary team or provide fire support if everything went wrong. It was necessary work. It was also exactly where Holt wanted her, far from the action, unable to prove herself when it mattered. After the briefing dispersed, she approached Commander Thorne. "Mum, un moment." Thorne regarded her with eyes that missed nothing. "Adeyemi, impressive work yesterday with Dawson." "Thank you, ma'am. I wanted to ask about the water approach assessment." Something flickered across Thorne's face. Interest, perhaps, or wariness. "Go on. The sonar grid has gaps." Yemisi pulled out her tablet, displaying the imagery she had studied during the briefing. "Here and here. The current patterns create blind spots approximately every 4 minutes. a skilled diver could thread through. And the patrol boats? Predictable rotation. 15-minute cycles mean there is a window at the 45-minute mark where both boats are on the far side of the island. Thorne studied the tablet. The sharks? Avoidable. They congregate near the warm outflow, which means the eastern channel stays relatively clear. A diver who knew the water, who could read the currents, could approach from the east and avoid the population entirely. The commander was quiet for a long moment. This is not a theoretical exercise, Adeyemi. You are proposing an actual alternative insertion route. Iam proposing a backup option, mang, in case the primary approach encounters problems. Before Thorne could respond, a shadow fell across them. Hole had approached without sound, a skill that reminded Yemisi he had not earned his reputation by accident. Adeyemi, he said, glancing at her tablet. Sharing your theories with the commander? Exploring contingencies, Senior Chief. Holt's smile did not reach his eyes. The water approach was ruled out by people with more experience than you possess. He turned to Thorne. Commander, I would hate for Chief Adeyemi's enthusiasm to distract from mission preparation. Perhaps her energy would be better spent ensuring the support element is ready to perform its actual function. Thorne looked between them, reading the tension that crackled like static electricity. She closed Yemisi's tablet and handed it back. Senior Chief Holt is correct that the primary approach has been thoroughly vetted. However, she added, holding up a hand to stop Holt's satisfied response, I never discourage operators from thinking creatively about problems. Adeyemi, continue your analysis. Bring me something comprehensive if you believe there is merit. Holt's expression hardened, but he said nothing. Protocol demanded he accept his commander's decision, even when it contradicted his preferences. After he walked away, Creel materialized at Yemisi's elbow. The old Master Chief had a gift for appearing exactly when needed. You just made an enemy, he observed quietly. I already had one. Creel chuckled. True enough. He nodded toward the door where Holt had disappeared. He lost his brother 5 years ago. Mission went bad, and he blamed an intelligence officer. A woman. Right or wrong. That is the wound you are pressing on every time you prove yourself capable. Yemisi absorbed this, filing it away. Trauma explained behavior, but did not excuse it. That evening, she returned to the training pool alone. The facility was empty, lights dimmed, water still and black as the ocean surrounding Croth Island. She stripped down to her swimsuit, touched her father's knife where it rested with her gear, and slipped into the darkness. For the next 3 hours, she practiced. Breath holds that pushed past 4 minutes, past 4.5, in a territory where most humans would have blacked out. Navigation with her eyes closed, trusting her body's sense of the water to guide her. Silence surfacing, breaking the plane so gently that the water barely rippled. She thought about Holt and his certainty that she did not belong. She thought about her father, who had taught her that the ocean rewarded those who respected it. She thought about the impossible approach to an impossible island, and the voice in her head that whispered it was not impossible at all. When she finally emerged, pruned and exhausted, Creel was waiting with a towel. Command wants a comprehensive analysis, she said. Then you had better make it comprehensive, he replied. And airtight, because Holt will tear apart anything less. 3 days before deployment, Yemisi presented her analysis to Commander Thorne. 14 pages of current charts, timing calculations, and obstacle assessments. Every detail verified, every variable accounted for. A water approach that transformed impossible into merely suicidal. Thorne studied the documents for 20 minutes without speaking. When she finally looked up, her expression betrayed nothing. This is impressive work, Adeyemi. Thank you, ma'am. It is also work that will never be approved for this mission. Thorne set the papers down. The primary approach has been locked. Assets are allocated. Holt's team has been rehearsing for 2 weeks. I cannot restructure the entire operation based on a theoretical alternative, no matter how well researched. Yemisi kept her voice steady. I understand, ma'am. I am not asking you to restructure. I am asking you to keep this as a contingency. If something goes wrong with the helicopter insertion, if the primary team needs support, this route exists. Thorne was quiet for a moment. You really believe you could swim that approach? 2.3 miles through hostile waters, past sonar nets and patrol boats, into a facility defended by former Spetsnaz? Yes, ma'am. I do. The commander leaned back in her chair. I will keep your analysis on file. That is all I can promise. It was not approval, but it was not dismissal either. Yemisi left the office feeling something between hope and frustration, the particular sensation of being taken seriously, but not seriously enough. She found Holt waiting in the corridor outside. Contingency planning, he said. The words dripped with contempt. You just cannot accept your role. Can you, Adeyemi? My role is to support this mission's success, Senior Chief. That includes identifying alternatives if the primary approach fails. Holt stepped closer, lowering his voice. The primary approach will not fail. My team does not fail. What you're doing is undermining confidence in a plan that has been vetted by people who have actually conducted these operations. People who have bled for this work while you were still learning which end of a rifle to hold. The insult landed, but Yemisi refused to show it. With respect, Senior Chief, my service record speaks for itself. Your service record is a participation trophy. He smiled coldly. You want to know why women do not belong in special operations? Because when it matters, when lives are on the line, you fold. Every single time. I have seen it happen. I have buried the consequences. His brother. The wound Creel had mentioned. Yemisi could see the pain beneath the anger, the grief that had calcified into prejudice. Understanding it did not make it easier to endure. I am sorry for your loss, Senior Chief, she said quietly. But I am not whoever failed you 5 years ago, and I will not apologize for being good at my job. Something dangerous flickered in Holt's eyes. Then he turned and walked away without another word. That night, Yemisi ran the training course alone. Full gear, blackout conditions, simulating the approach she had designed. The pool could not replicate ocean currents or patrol boat searchlights, but it could test her endurance, her navigation, her ability to function when every instinct screamed for air. For minutes, 30 seconds underwater. Then 4:45. Then, on her final attempt, 5 minutes and 12 seconds, surfacing so gently that the ripples barely reached the pool's edge. Creel found her in the equipment room afterward, cleaning her gear with methodical precision. Heard you had words with Holt, he said. He had words. I listened. The old Master Chief settled onto a bench across from her. He is not wrong about everything, you know. The helicopter approach is solid. His team is capable. There's a good chance this mission goes exactly as planned. And if it does not, Creel shrugged. Then we adapt. That is what we do. Yemisi set down her mask and looked at him directly. You trained with my father, back when the teams were even more closed off than they are now. How did he handle people like Holt? Creel's weathered face softened with memory. Emeka did not handle them. He outlasted them, kept showing up, kept performing, kept being so undeniably good that eventually the doubters ran out of excuses. He chuckled. Took about 10 years, if I recall. Your father was a patient man. I'm not sure I have 10 years. You might not need them. Creel leaned forward. Listen to me, Adeyemi. I have watched you since you arrived at this unit. You are one of the most naturally gifted water operators I have ever seen, and I have seen a lot of them. Your instincts, your comfort in the ocean, that thing you do where you seem to disappear even when someone is looking right at you. It is rare, rarer than Holt wants to admit. Then why does he fight so hard against me? Because you terrify him. Creel stood, his knees popping audibly. Not you personally, what you represent. The possibility that everything he believes about who belongs in this world might be wrong. That is a hard thing for a man to face, especially a man carrying the kind of guilt Brandon Holt carries. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get some sleep. Deployment is in 72 hours. Whatever happens on that island, you need to be ready. Alone again, Yemisi finished cleaning her gear and allowed herself to think about the mission ahead. Holt would lead his team onto that island. She would wait on a boat offshore, listening to radio traffic, hoping for success and preparing for disaster. It was not the role she wanted, but it was the role she had been given. She touched her father's knife, feeling the worn handle against her palm. He had waited 10 years for acceptance. He had outlasted every doubter, proved himself in waters that would have killed lesser men, earned respect through sheer undeniable excellence. And then the ocean had taken him anyway, swallowed him whole while he saved strangers who would never know his name. Patience was a virtue, but Yemisi could not shake the feeling that patience was a luxury this mission would not afford. 72 hours. Then the helicopters would fly, the assault would begin, and she would learn whether her contingency plan was paranoid preparation or prophecy. The night before deployment, Yemisi could not sleep. She lay in her rack staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of final preparations echoing through the compound. Helicopters being fueled, weapons being checked, men speaking in low voices about what tomorrow might bring. She gave up on rest at 0300 and made her way to the equipment bay. The space was empty except for one figure hunched over a workbench, hands moving with practiced precision over a piece of machinery Yemisi did not immediately recognize. Creel looked up as she approached. Could not sleep either? Too much thinking. The old Master Chief nodded and returned his attention to the device before him. Yemisi stepped closer and realized it was a rebreather unit, but modified in ways she had never seen. Additional chambers, redundant systems, a profile slimmer than standard issue. What is that? Insurance. Creel connected two components with a soft click. I've been tinkering with this for about 6 months. Extended duration, closed-circuit system. Adds roughly 40% to underwater operational time compared to standard equipment. Yemisi studied the device with new appreciation. You built this yourself? Designed it. Had some help with fabrication from a friend at the dive systems lab. He set down his tools and looked at her directly. It is not officially approved. Probably never will be. Too experimental for the procurement process. Then why show me? Creel was quiet for a moment. Because I read your contingency analysis. Every page. And because I have been doing this job for 31 years, long enough to recognize when official plans have blind spots. You think the helicopter approach will fail? I think Colonel Volkov did not survive 15 years in Spetsnaz and another decade as a mercenary by being predictable. The intelligence assessment says he is paranoid about air approaches because of an incident in Chechnya. Lost half his unit to an ambush after helicopter insertion. Creel shrugged. If I were him, and I knew my enemy's favored air assault, I would prepare accordingly. The implication settled over Yemisi like cold water. Manpads. Surface to air missile. The one threat that could turn a helicopter insertion into a massacre. Did you raise this with Commander Thorne? I raised concerns. Officially noted, officially dismissed. The intelligence confidence level on Volkov's defensive capabilities is rated moderate, not high enough to scrub an approach that has already been approved and rehearsed. Creel picked up the modified rebreather and held it out to her. But if something goes wrong tomorrow, if that helicopter takes fire and Holt's team ends up scattered or captured, there will be approximately 36 hours before Volkov moves or eliminates any prisoners. 36 hours where the only viable rescue approach will be the one everyone said was impossible. Yemisi took the rebreather, feeling its weight in her hands. The weight of possibility. The weight of responsibility. This could end my career, she said. Unsanctioned equipment. Unauthorized mission planning. Your career ends anyway if good operators die, because nobody was prepared for contingencies. Creel's voice carried the authority of 3 decades in special warfare. I am not ordering you to do anything, Adeyemi. I am giving you a tool and trusting your judgment about when to use it. She thought about Holt and his certainty. She thought about Commander Thorne and her constraints. She thought about the men who would board those helicopters tomorrow, men who had families and futures and no idea that their lives might depend on a woman they had been taught to dismiss. Thank you, Master Chief. Creel nodded once, then began packing away his tools. Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow is going to be long either way. But Yemisi did not return to her rack. Instead, she carried the rebreather to the training pool and spent the remaining hours before dawn learning its systems, testing its capabilities, pushing herself through underwater exercises until her body memorized every function. At 0530, She watched from the tarmac as Holt's team conducted final preparations. 12 operators in full assault kit, faces painted, weapons checked and rechecked. They moved with the quiet confidence of men who had done this before, who trusted their training and their leadership and each other. Holt caught her watching and crossed the distance between them. Enjoying the view. Adeyemi? Just observing professionals at work, Senior Chief. Something in her tone made him pause. For a moment, the hostility faded, and she glimpsed the operator beneath the prejudice. A man who genuinely cared about his team. A man who carried wounds he had never learned to heal. Whatever happens out there, Holt said slowly, you follow orders. You stay with the support element. You do not improvise. He held her gaze. People who improvise in combat get other people killed. I will not have that on my conscience. Understood, Senior Chief. He studied her for another moment, then turned and walked back to his team without another word. At 0600, the helicopters lifted off. Yemisi watched them disappear into the pre-dawn darkness, carrying 16 operators toward an island that officially did not exist. Then she boarded the support vessel with the rest of her element and began the long journey to their holding position offshore. The radios stayed quiet for the first 2 hours. Normal operational silence. Expected. Professional. Then, at 0817, the silence shattered. Primary 1, this is Overwatch. We have missile launch detection. Repeat, missile launch detection bearing. The transmission cut to static. Then chaos. Voices overlapping, alarms shrieking, someone screaming coordinates that made no sense. And then, clear as a death knell, Commander Thorne's voice from the command center. Primary element is down. Helicopter destroyed. We have men in the water. All units stand by. Yemisi's hand moved to the modified rebreather stowed beneath her seat. Creel's insurance policy. The impossible approach that had just become the only approach. 36 hours. Maybe less. She closed her eyes and saw her father's face, calm and certain. The way he always looked before entering dangerous water. Time to swim. The support vessel erupted into controlled chaos. Radio operators scrambled for information while the boat commander barked orders that competed with the static-filled transmissions from the disaster zone. Yemisi stood motionless amid the frenzy, her mind racing through calculations she had hoped would never matter. 2.3 miles of hostile water. Sonar nets. Patrol boats. Sharks. And somewhere on that island, her teammates were either dying or already dead. The intelligence officer aboard, a young lieutenant named Adara, pieced together fragments from intercepted communications. 3 survivors confirmed. She announced, her voice tight with professional control. Senior Chief Holt, Petty Officer Brennan, and Petty Officer Castellano. They have been captured and moved inside the facility. What about the others? Someone asked. Adara's silence answered the question. Yemisi felt the loss settle into her chest, cold and heavy. 9 operators gone in a flash of fire and falling metal. 9 families who would receive visits from uniformed strangers. 9 empty seats at tables across America. But 3 were still alive. 3 could still be saved. She moved to the communication station and requested a secure channel to Commander Thorne. The connection took 47 seconds that felt like hours. Adeyemi. Thorne's voice carried the weight of catastrophe. I know what you're going to ask. Ma'am, my contingency analysis is still valid. The water approach remains viable. I can reach that facility before Volkov decides what to do with his prisoners. A long pause. When Thorne spoke again, her words were careful. The Joint Task Force commander has already ruled out rescue attempts. Assets are being repositioned for a standoff strike. The facility will be destroyed by cruise missile within 18 hours. Yemisi's blood went cold. That will kill the hostages. The hostages are assessed as unrecoverable. Thorne's voice cracked slightly. I argued, Adeyemi. I argued until they cut my communication privileges. The decision has been made above my pay grade. Unrecoverable. A clinical word for abandoning 3 Americans to die in fire meant for their captors. Yemisi thought of Holt, bleeding somewhere in that fortress, waiting for rescue that would never come. The man who hated her. The man who had lost his brother to what he saw as a woman's failure. The man who was about to become another casualty of decisions made by people who would never smell the smoke. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "if I were to attempt an unsanctioned approach, what would be the consequences?" Another pause, longer than the first. "Chief Adeyemi, I am obligated to inform you that any unauthorized action would constitute a violation of direct orders, potentially resulting in court-martial, imprisonment, and dishonorable discharge." Thorne's tone shifted almost imperceptibly. "I am also obligated to inform you that communications in this operational theater have been compromised by enemy jamming, and that I may not receive accurate reports of personnel movements for the next several hours." The message beneath the message. Plausible deniability. A door left slightly open. "Understood, Mom." "Adeyemi." Thorne's voice softened. "Your father was one of the finest operators I ever served with. Whatever you decide, make him proud." The channel closed. Yemisi turned to find Creel standing behind her, the modified rebreather already in his hands. "I heard," he said simply. The whole boat heard. Around them, the support element had gone quiet. Faces turned toward her, some skeptical, some curious, some showing the first glimmers of something that might have been hope. Petty Officer Otteris stepped forward. "Chief Adeyemi, the approach you designed. The timing windows, the sonar gaps. Is it actually possible?" Yemisi took the rebreather from Creel and began checking its seals. Possible is not the same as probable. The current charts are 12 hours old. The patrol boat rotation might have changed after the attack. And even if I reach the facility, I will be one operator against an unknown number of hostiles. But you think you can do it?" Yemisi met the young lieutenant's eyes. "I think those men will die if someone does not try. I think I'm the only one here with the skills to make the attempt. And I think my father did not raise me to watch people drown when I could swim." She began stripping off her standard gear and replacing it with the equipment she had prepared. Wetsuit designed for extended immersion. Waterproof holster for her sidearm. Her father's knife secured against her thigh. Creel helped her with the rebreather, his weathered hands steady despite the tension in his jaw. "You remember the approach sequence? Every meter. The ghost trick? The heart rate suppression for the thermal sensors? I have been practicing for 3 years." Yemisi pulled the mask down around her neck. "I will not get a second chance at this." The boat commander approached, his expression conflicted. "Chief Adeyemi, I cannot officially authorize this action." "I'm not asking for authorization, Commander. I'm asking you to slow the boat for approximately 30 seconds while I check something in the water." Understanding passed between them. The commander nodded once, then turned to his helmsman. "I'll stop. We have debris in the water that requires visual inspection." The engines quieted. The vessel drifted. Yemisi moved to the stern platform where the black water waited, patient and hungry and familiar. Creel gripped her shoulder. "Come back, Adeyemi. That is an order." She almost smiled. "You cannot give me orders, Master Chief. You are retired next month." Then consider it a strong suggestion. Yemisi pulled her mask into place, bit down on the rebreather mouthpiece, and looked out at the darkness that separated her from the island. 2.3 miles. 36 hours of training compressed into one impossible swim. 3 lives hanging in the balance. She touched her father's knife one final time, feeling his presence in the worn handle. Then she stepped off the platform and let the black water swallow her whole. The ocean embraced her like a cold and patient god. Yemisi descended into darkness, so complete that the concept of sight became meaningless. Only her other senses remained. The pressure building against her eardrums. The taste of recycled air from the rebreather. The current sliding along her wetsuit like fingers testing her resolve. She had memorized the approach in 3 dimensions. 2.3 miles broken into segments, each with its own challenges, its own timing windows, its own opportunities to die. The first segment was open water, 700 meters of swimming against a lateral current that wanted to push her south toward the shark congregation zone. Yemisi kicked steadily, conserving energy while fighting the drift. Her compass glowed faintly on her wrist, the only light in a universe of black. Every 30 seconds, she checked her heading. adjusted her stroke, calculated her progress against the mental map burned into her memory. 17 minutes into the swim, she reached the first sonar net. The technology was Russian-made, military-grade, designed to detect submarines and combat swimmers alike. Its active pulses swept the water in overlapping patterns that left gaps measured in seconds rather than minutes. Yemisi had identified these gaps during her analysis. Theoretical gaps based on satellite imagery and signal intelligence. Now she would learn if theory matched reality. She hovered at the edge of detection range, slowing her breathing, counting the rhythm of the pulses. 1 sweep. 2. 3. There. A 4-second window where the patterns diverged, creating a corridor approximately 2 meters wide. For seconds to cross 15 meters of open water. Yemisi exploded forward, arms pulling and legs driving with everything she had. The water resisted, thick and heavy, fighting her progress with the indifference of physics. 3 seconds. 10 meters. 4 seconds. 12 meters. She felt the pulse sweep behind her, close enough that her skin tingled with its passage. But she was through, gliding into the shadow of a rock formation that blocked the next sensor array, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped animal. 1 obstacle down. She allowed herself 3 breaths of recovery before continuing. The second segment took her deeper, following an underwater ridge that provided cover from surface observation. Here the pressure became a physical presence, squeezing her chest, pressing against her mask, reminding her that humans were not meant to exist in this realm. The modified rebreather performed flawlessly, Creel's engineering proving itself with every breath she drew. At the 40-minute mark, she encountered the patrol boat. Its hull materialized above her like a dark cloud, engines thrumming through the water with a vibration she felt in her bones. Searchlights stabbed downward, cutting bright columns through the murk, sweeping in patterns designed to catch exactly what she was attempting. Yemisi descended. 50 feet. 60. 70. The pressure became agony, her sinuses screaming, her vision narrowing at the edges. But the lights could not reach this depth, and the boat sonar was calibrated for shallower threats. She waited, lungs burning despite the rebreather's assistance, watching the hull drift overhead like a predator seeking prey. 2 minutes. 3. Finally, the engines increased pitch and the boat moved on, continuing its patrol route toward the eastern perimeter. Yemisi ascended slowly, carefully, giving her body time to adjust. Too fast, and the pressure differential would knock her unconscious. Too slow, and she would miss her timing window for the next obstacle. The shark zone waited at the 70-minute mark. She smelled them before she saw them, a copper tinge in the water that spoke of feeding and blood. The warm outflow from the island's generators created a current that attracted oceanic white tips, aggressive predators that had learned to associate this place with easy meals. Yemisi counted at least 6 shapes circling in the thermal plume, their movements lazy but purposeful. Her planned route skirted the eastern edge of their territory, far enough to avoid the main congregation, close enough that a curious individual might investigate. She had prepared for this possibility, but preparation and reality were different animals entirely. She moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her profile minimal and her movements smooth. Sharks responded to panic, to the erratic vibrations of wounded prey. Yemisi gave them nothing, gliding through the darkness like she belonged there, like she was simply another predator passing through. One of them turned toward her, a female, perhaps 8 feet long, scarred along her flank from some ancient battle. The shark approached with the casual confidence of an apex predator, close enough that Yemisi could see the black emptiness of her eyes. Yemisi did not flee, did not freeze. She maintained her steady pace, her heart rate controlled through sheer force of will, her body language communicating nothing but calm purpose. The shark circled once, twice, then lost interest and returned to the thermal plume. Yemisi continued forward, not allowing herself to feel relief until the copper smell faded and the shapes disappeared behind her. 90 minutes into the swim, She reached the island's underwater shelf. Above her, perhaps 30 feet up, the dock pilings rose like dark pillars supporting the enemy fortress. She could hear footsteps on the planking, voices speaking in Russian and Arabic, the mechanical hum of generators working to power Volkov's surveillance empire. Yemisi checked her watch. 12 hours and 17 minutes until the cruise missiles arrived. Somewhere above her, Holt and 2 other Americans waited for a rescue that official channels had already abandoned. She began her final approach, rising through the black water toward the thin membrane of surface that separated ocean from air, failure from success, life from death. The outpost had no idea what was coming. The dock pilings offered shadow and concealment. Yemisi hovered beneath the wooden planking, her face inches from the surface, listening to the world above. Boots on wood. 2 guards, maybe 3, walking a lazy patrol pattern. Radio chatter in Russian, too muffled to decipher, but carrying the bored cadence of men who did not expect trouble. They had just shot down a helicopter and captured American operators. In their minds, the threat had been neutralized. No one was coming. Certainly not through the water they had declared impassable. Yemisi allowed herself a grim smile. Arrogance was a vulnerability like any other. She needed intelligence before she surfaced. The facility layout existed in her memory from satellite imagery, but imagery could not show guard rotations, prisoner locations, or the position of Colonel Volkov himself. She needed eyes on the target, which meant finding a vantage point without being detected. The thermal sensors presented the final obstacle. Mounted along the dock's edge, they scanned the waterline for the heat signatures of approaching swimmers. Standard countermeasures involved thermal dampening suits, equipment Yemisi did not have. What she had instead was something far more difficult to acquire. Control. She called it the ghost trick, though Creel had given it a more technical name during her training. Voluntary hypothermic response. The ability to slow her heart rate, constrict her blood vessels, and lower her core temperature until her thermal signature dropped below detection threshold. Most humans could not do it at all. Those who could rarely managed more than a few minutes before their bodies rebelled. Yemisi could hold the state for nearly 10 minutes. Her father had taught her the basics in the waters off Lagos, showing her how to become part of the ocean rather than a visitor to it. Navy training had refined the technique. Years of practice had perfected it. She began the process now, slowing her breathing, willing her heart to quiet, embracing the cold water until it no longer felt cold at all. Her vision dimmed slightly as blood retreated from her extremities. Her thoughts became slow and clear, like stones sinking through still water. When her watch showed her core temperature had dropped 3 degrees, she moved. The surface broke around her face with barely a ripple. She emerged in the shadow of a piling. The thermal sensor 6 feet to her left, its electronic eye sweeping past her without recognition. To the machine, she was simply more ocean, cool and dark and empty of life. Yemisi pulled herself onto a crossbeam beneath the dock, her movements glacial and deliberate. The ghost state made speed impossible, but it also made her invisible. She crawled along the beam until she reached a gap in the planking, a space just wide enough to observe the facility above. The outpost spread before her in harsh floodlight. A central communications building bristled with antennae and satellite dishes. Generator housings hummed to the east, barracks to the west, and directly ahead, a squat concrete structure with barred windows and a single reinforced door. The holding cells. 2 guards stood at the entrance, armed with automatic weapons, their postures suggesting alertness despite the late hour. Through one of the barred windows, Yemisi glimpsed movement, a figure pacing, alive. She counted the guards she could see, 12 total across the compound, probably more inside the buildings. 1 operator against a fortified position held by trained mercenaries. The mathematics of her situation were brutally simple. But mathematics did not account for darkness, did not account for surprise, did not account for a woman who could move through shadows like she had been born in them. Yemisi began warming herself, slowly releasing the ghost state, letting her heart find its natural rhythm. The process took 4 minutes, 4 minutes of vulnerability during which she mapped patrol patterns and identified her approach route. The generator building would be her first target. Kill the power and the floodlights die. Without light, her advantages multiplied. She had trained in darkness, had learned to navigate by sound and touch and instinct. These men relied on technology and illumination. Take those away, and the balance shifted. Her father's knife pressed against her thigh, a reminder of where she came from and why she was here. Emeka Adeyemi had pulled drowning tourists from a riptide on a Lagos beach, swimming into danger again and again until the ocean finally claimed him. He had died saving strangers because that was who he was, because some people could not watch others drown, even when swimming meant dying. Yemisi understood now, had always understood, perhaps, but the knowledge had become something deeper during her journey through the black water. This was not about proving herself to Holt or earning respect from doubters or honoring her father's memory. This was simply about who she was. A swimmer, a rescuer, someone who moved toward danger when others moved away. 3 Americans waited in that concrete building. 3 men who would die in fire if she failed. 3 lives measured against one, and the mathematics of that equation had only one answer. She checked her sidearm. 14 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. Her knife, a small explosive charge intended for the generator. The element of surprise. It would have to be enough. The patrol pattern showed a gap approaching. 45 seconds where the route between her position and the generator building would be unwatched. 45 seconds to cross 60 meters of open ground. Yemisi tensed, muscles coiling, breath steadying. The guards turned away. She moved. 60 meters of open ground stretched before her like a killing field. Yemisi covered it in 9 seconds, her bare feet silent on the packed earth, her body low and fluid as she moved between patches of shadow. The wet suit had dried enough to eliminate the slapping sound of wet neoprene, but she could feel the chill still trapped against her skin, a reminder of the ocean that waited behind her. She reached the generator building and pressed herself against its corrugated metal wall. The structure vibrated with mechanical energy, diesel engines churning to feed the facility's hungry electronics. Heat radiated through the metal, a stark contrast to the cold she had carried from the water. 2 access points. A main door on the north face, currently visible to the patrol route. A maintenance hatch on the east side, partially obscured by storage containers. Yemisi chose the hatch. The lock was industrial, but simple. Her knife found the gap between housing and hasp, applying torsion while a bent piece of wire from her equipment worked the pins. 8 seconds. The lock clicked open. Inside, the generator room roared with sound and stank of fuel and hot metal. 3 massive diesel units dominated the space, their output cables running through conduits toward the communications building. Yemisi identified the main junction box mounted on the far wall, the nexus point where all power flowed outward. She set the explosive charge against the junction box, activating the timer for 90 seconds. Enough time to reach position near the holding cells. Enough time to prepare for the darkness that would follow. 87 seconds remaining. She exited through the same hatch, sealing it behind her, and began moving toward the concrete structure where her teammates waited. The patrol pattern had shifted slightly, one guard deviating from his route to light a cigarette near the barracks entrance. The deviation gave her an extra 15 meters of unobserved approach. 70 seconds. The holding cell building grew larger as she approached, its windowless walls and reinforced door promising difficulty. 2 guards still flanked the entrance, their weapons held with casual readiness. She would need to neutralize them before the lights died, while they could still see and she could control the engagement. 53 seconds. Yemisi circled to the building's blind side, where shadow pooled deepest against the concrete. She could hear voices from within now, harsh interrogation, tones punctuated by the sound of impact. Someone was being beaten. Someone was refusing to break. 41 seconds. She drew her sidearm and her father's knife, one weapon in each hand, and moved toward the corner that would bring the guards into view. Her heart rate remained steady, her breathing controlled, her mind clear and cold as the water she had crossed. 30 seconds. The first guard never saw her. She came around the corner like a shadow taking form, the knife finding the gap between his body armor and helmet, severing his ability to scream before he understood he was dying. He folded silently, and she caught his weapon before it could clatter against the ground. The second guard turned at the movement, his eyes widening, his mouth opening to shout. Yemisi's sidearm coughed twice, the suppressed rounds punching through his throat and ending his warning before it began. He dropped beside his partner, and the night remained quiet. 15 seconds. She tried the door. Locked from within. Reinforced steel, too heavy to breach without explosives she did not have. But there was a window set high in the wall beside it, bars on the outside, glass on the inside. The bars were bolted to aging concrete that had spent years enduring salt air and tropical humidity. 8 seconds. Yemisi jammed her knife into the gap between bars and wall, leveraging with all her strength. The concrete crumbled. One bar came free, then another, creating a gap just wide enough for her body. 3 seconds. She smashed the glass with her elbow and dove through the opening as the world went dark. The explosion was muffled by distance, but unmistakable. Every light in the facility died simultaneously, plunging the outpost into absolute blackness. Shouts erupted across the compound, voices calling in Russian and Arabic, flashlight beams stabbing randomly through the darkness. Yemisi landed in a crouch inside the holding cell building, her eyes already adjusted from the swim through lightless water. The darkness that blinded the enemy was her natural element. She moved through it like a fish through current, silent and sure. The interior corridor stretched ahead, 3 cell doors on each side. A guard stumbled from a room at the far end, fumbling with a flashlight that refused to cooperate. Yemisi closed the distance in 4 strides. Her knife opened his throat before the light could flicker on. She heard Holt's voice then, hoarse but defiant, coming from the second cell on the left. Who is there? What is happening? Yemisi found the cell door, found the lock, found the keyring on the dead guard's belt. The mechanism turned and the door swung open, revealing 3 figures huddled in the darkness. Holt, his face swollen and bloody. Brennan, clutching a clearly broken arm. Castellano, unconscious or worse, slumped against the far wall. Chief Adeyemi, Yemisi said quietly. United States Navy. I am here to take you home. The silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Holt spoke, his voice carrying something she had never heard from him before. How in the hell did you get here? I swam. Before he could respond, gunfire erupted outside. The mercenaries were organizing, their panic transforming into tactical response. Flashlight beams swept past the broken window. Voices barked orders. Boots pounded toward the holding cell building. Yemisi handed Holt the weapon she had taken from the first guard. Can you move? He checked the magazine, his training overriding his injuries. Brennan can walk. Castellano needs to be carried. Then we carry him. She moved to the unconscious operator, slinging his arm over her shoulder. Stay behind me. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. We're going out the way I came in. The way you came in is through the water. Yes. Holt stared at her through the darkness, his battered face unreadable. We will drown. No, Yemisi said with absolute certainty. You will not. I do not let people drown. The corridor filled with the sound of approaching boots. Yemisi counted the footsteps, calculated the numbers. At least 6 men converging on the holding cell building, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness like angry searchlights. She guided the group toward the broken window, her mind racing through contingencies. Castellano's dead weight slowed their movement. Brennan's broken arm made him clumsy in the darkness. Only Holt moved with anything resembling tactical efficiency, and even he was operating on adrenaline and willpower rather than actual capability. The window, she whispered. Brennan first, then Castellano. Holt, you cover our exit. Holt positioned himself at the corridor junction, the borrowed rifle raised despite his injuries. His breathing was ragged but controlled. Whatever else she thought of him, the man knew how to fight. Brennan scrambled through the window with difficulty, his broken arm making the maneuver agony. Yemisi heard him drop to the ground outside, heard his stifled groan of pain. Then she lifted Castellano toward the opening, feeding his unconscious body through the gap, while Holt held the corridor. The first mercenary appeared at the far end of the hallway. Holt fired twice, controlled bursts that dropped the man before he could raise his weapon. The muzzle flash strobed through the darkness, momentarily illuminating the blood on Holt's face, the determination in his eyes. "Move," Yemisi commanded. She pushed Castellano through, heard Brennan catch him on the other side. Holt fired again, driving back a second attacker, then turned and dove through the window with a grace that belied his battered condition. Yemisi followed, rolling through the opening as bullets tore into the wall above her head. She hit the ground beside the others, immediately scanning for threats. The compound had become a hornet's nest, flashlight beams crisscrossing in the darkness, voices shouting coordinates and commands. "The dock," she said. "Stay low, stay quiet, follow me exactly." They moved through shadows that Yemisi knew intimately from her reconnaissance. She led them between storage containers, behind the barracks building, through a drainage culvert that ran beneath the main pathway. Castellano's weight burned in her shoulders and thighs, but she refused to slow. Behind them, the mercenaries discovered the empty cell. The shouting intensified, became organized. "Perimeter sweep," someone bellowed in Russian. They cannot have gone far. The dock materialized from the darkness, its wooden planking extending over the black water that had delivered her here. Yemisi guided them toward the pilings, toward the shadow beneath the structure where the thermal sensors could not reach. "Can any of you swim?" she asked quietly. Brennan nodded. "Qualified rescue swimmer before my transfer. The arm is going to be a problem, but I can manage." Holt's jaw tightened. "I can swim. Not pretty, but functional." "What about Castellano?" Yemisi looked at the unconscious man, assessing his condition in the minimal light. His breathing was shallow but steady. No obvious water in his lungs. He might survive immersion if they kept his head above water. "We buddy breathe," she decided. "Brennan, you take point. Holt, you help me with Castellano. We stay on the surface as long as possible, submerge only if patrol boats force us down." "The surface," Holt repeated. "You came in underwater, through the sonar nets and the sharks and God knows what else. You want us to swim out on the surface?" "The sonar nets are designed to detect submerged contacts. Surface swimmers read as debris or marine life, and the sharks stay near the warm outflow on the southern perimeter. We're going northeast. You plan an exit route." "I plan for every possibility." Holt stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. The contempt that had defined their relationship was cracking, forced to confront a reality that contradicted everything he believed. A flashlight beam swept toward the dock. Yemisi pushed them all beneath the planking, into the water, swallowing the gasp that came with the cold's embrace. The beam passed overhead, probing the darkness, finding nothing. "Now," Yemisi whispered. They slipped into the open water, for figures barely visible against the black expanse. Brennan took the lead, his stroke awkward but effective despite his injury. Holt helped support Castellano, keeping the unconscious man's face above water, while Yemisi guided them toward the extraction point. The first 100 meters passed in tense silence. Then the patrol boat's engines roared to life. Searchlights blazed across the water, sweeping in expanding arcs from the dock. The boat accelerated toward them, its crew clearly operating on orders to shoot anything they found. "Deep breath," Yemisi ordered. "We go under." "Brennan," Buddy breathed with Holt. "I have Castellano." She pulled the unconscious operator beneath the surface, sharing her rebreather's mouthpiece, forcing air into his lungs while they sank into the protective darkness. Above them, the searchlight turned the water into a column of green-white illumination that stopped just short of their depth. Yemisi watched the light, counting seconds, feeling Castellano's chest rise and fall with borrowed breath. The boat passed directly overhead, its hull a dark shadow against the glow, propellers churning the water into turbulent chaos. 30 seconds. 40. 50. Her lungs burned. Castellano stirred weakly against her grip, consciousness flickering somewhere beneath his closed eyelids. Brennan and Holt were invisible in the darkness, either swimming or drowning, alive or dead. The searchlight moved on. The engine noise faded. Yemisi kicked toward the surface, dragging Castellano with her, breaking into air that had never tasted sweeter. Brennan surfaced 5 meters to her left, gasping. Holt emerged beside him, coughing but functional. "Everyone alive?" Yemisi asked. Holt wiped water from his eyes and looked at her with an expression she could not read. "Everyone is alive. Then we keep swimming. Extraction point is 1,800 meters northeast. Stay with me." She turned toward the open ocean, toward safety, toward the impossible completion of an impossible mission. Behind them, the island's searchlights continued their futile sweep of empty water. Ahead, darkness and distance and salvation. Yemisi swam, and the others followed. 1,800 meters became 1,500, then 1,200, then 1,000. Yemisi led them through the darkness, navigating by stars and instinct, her body operating on reserves she had not known she possessed. Castellano had regained partial consciousness, enough to kick weakly and keep his head above water with minimal assistance. Brennan's stroke had steadied despite his broken arm. Holt swam in grim silence, his injuries forgotten or ignored through sheer force of will. The patrol boat made 2 more sweeps, its searchlight painting the water in the distance, but each pass took it farther from their position. Volkov's men were searching the wrong quadrant, their assumptions about escape routes blinding them to the impossible thing Yemisi had accomplished. 800 meters from extraction, Castellano spoke his first words. "Where are we?" "Ocean," Yemisi replied without breaking her stroke. "Swimming home." "The hell happened?" "Your chief Adeyemi happened," Holt answered. His voice carried something unfamiliar, something that might have been respect fighting through layers of pride and prejudice. She swam through 2 miles of defended water, infiltrated the facility alone, killed 6 hostiles, and broke us out. That is what happened. Castellano processed this information in silence. Then, the woman Holt said did not belong in special operations? The same. Holt said nothing. The water between them filled with years of doubt and dismissal, all of it dissolving in the salt and the darkness. 600 meters. Yemisi's arms had become lead weights, her legs burning with lactic acid, her lungs working harder than the rebreather could compensate for. She had been in the water for nearly 5 hours now, swimming and fighting and surviving on determination alone. 500 meters. The extraction point was a set of coordinates in empty ocean, a location where Creel would be waiting if he had managed to convince the support vessel to hold position. If he had not, they would be swimming until dawn or drowning before it arrived. 400 meters. A light flickered in the distance. Yemisi blinked salt water from her eyes and looked again. The light remained, a single point of illumination rising and falling with the swells. "I see it," Brennan gasped. "That is our boat." They covered the final distance in a surge of desperate energy. The support vessel materialized from the darkness, its running lights dimmed, but visible, a rigid-hulled inflatable deployed from its stern with 2 figures aboard. Creel's voice cut across the water. "Adeyemi? That you?" "For coming in," she called back. 3 wounded. "Get the medical kit ready." Hands reached down and pulled them from the ocean one by one. Castellano first, then Brennan, then Holt. Yemisi came last, her grip nearly failing on the inflatable's rope ladder, her body finally acknowledging the toll of what she had demanded from it. She collapsed on the deck and stared up at the stars, breathing real air, feeling the solidity of something that was not water beneath her back. Creel knelt beside her, his weathered face split by a grin she had never seen from him before. "You actually did it. You crazy, magnificent woman, you actually did it." The rebreather worked perfectly, she managed. "Good engineering." He laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I will put that in my retirement report." The medical team swarmed over the rescued operators, assessing injuries, starting 4 lines, treating wounds that had gone untended for too long. Yemisi should have joined them on the examination table, should have submitted to the same protocols, but something made her stand instead. Holt was sitting on a cargo crate, a corpseman cleaning the gashes on his face. His eyes found hers across the deck. Adeyemi. She walked toward him, her legs unsteady, her body screaming for rest. Senior Chief. He was quiet for a long moment, the corpseman working around his silence. When he spoke, each word seemed to cost him something. I was wrong. 3 syllables that rewrote 5 years of certainty. Yemisi let them settle before responding. About what specifically? Everything. He winced as the corpseman hit a particularly deep cut. About you. About women in special operations. About what people are capable of when you stop putting limits on them based on what you think you know. Your brother's death was not caused by that intelligence officer being a woman. Holt's jaw tightened. I know. I think I have always known. It was easier to blame something I could see than to accept that sometimes missions fail and people die and there's no reason that makes it hurt less. Yemisi thought about her father, about the ocean that had taken him, about the years she had spent trying to understand why the water would claim someone who loved it so completely. Some grief had no resolution. You simply learned to carry it. I did not save you to prove a point, she said. I know. I saved you because you were my teammate. Because that is what we do. Holt nodded slowly. He extended his hand, the gesture formal despite the circumstances. Then I owe you my life, Chief Adeyemi, and I will not forget it. She took his hand, felt his grip firm despite his injuries. It was not friendship. It was not forgiveness for the years of dismissal and doubt. But it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement was a place to start. Commander Thorne's voice crackled over the ship's radio, cutting through the moment. Support vessel, this is Task Force Command. Confirm status of rescue operation. Creel grabbed the handset. Command, this is Master Chief Creel. Rescue operation successful. 3 hostages recovered, all alive. Returning to base at best speed. A pause. Then Thorne's voice again, carrying something that sounded remarkably like joy. Outstanding work. Tell Chief Adeyemi the Joint Task Force Commander wants a full debrief. And tell her the crew's missile strike has been canceled. Yemisi closed her eyes and let the words wash over her. The missiles would not fall. The hostages were safe. The mission was complete. She touched her father's knife, still secured at her thigh, and whispered a prayer of thanks into the salting air. The debrief lasted 11 hours. Yemisi sat in a secure conference room at Joint Task Force headquarters, recounting every detail of her infiltration while intelligence officers recorded her words and analysts mapped her route on digital displays. They made her describe the sonar net passage 6 times, the shark encounter 4 times, the ghost trick thermal evasion 7 times. Each repetition added to their understanding and subtracted from her remaining energy. Commander Thorne observed from the back of the room, her expression unreadable, but her presence a quiet endorsement of everything Yemisi had accomplished. When the intelligence officers finally exhausted their questions, a 2-star Admiral Yemisi had never met entered the room. Rear Admiral Catherine Oyelerin, according to the nameplate on her uniform. Nigerian surname. The coincidence was not lost on either of them. Chief Petty Officer Adeyemi, the Admiral said, taking a seat across from her. I have been reviewing your service record alongside the events of the past 36 hours. The contrast is remarkable. Mum, your record shows a capable operator consistently passed over for advancement opportunities and high-visibility assignments. The events of the past 36 hours show one of the most extraordinary solo operations in recent special warfare history. Oyelerin leaned forward. Someone has been keeping you in a box, Chief. I would like to know why. Yemisi considered her response carefully. There have been differing opinions about my suitability for certain roles, ma'am. Differing opinions. The Admiral's tone suggested she understood exactly what those words concealed. I have spoken with Senior Chief Holt. He was remarkably forthcoming about his previous assessments of your capabilities. He was equally forthcoming about how wrong those assessments were. Senior Chief Holt and I have reached an understanding. So I gathered. O'Yelleran stood, moving to the window that overlooked the base's harbor. Your father was Emeka Adeyemi, Master Chief, Naval Special Warfare. Died in 2008 during an off-duty rescue operation in Lagos. Yes, ma'am. I knew him. We served together briefly, early in my career. He was the finest combat swimmer I ever witnessed. The Admiral turned back to face her. You have his gift, perhaps even more of it than he did. The words landed somewhere deep in Yemisi's chest, in the place where she kept her father's memory locked away from the world. What happens now, ma'am? Now you rest. Recover. Let the medical staff do their job. O'Yelleran returned to her seat. After that, we have decisions to make. Your actions have attracted attention at levels I am not at liberty to discuss. There are people who want to know more about the operator who swam through impossible waters and brought 3 men home. What kind of people? The kind who run programs that do not officially exist. The Admiral's expression softened slightly, but those conversations can wait. For now, Chief Adeyemi, you should know that what you accomplished will not be forgotten. Not by the men you saved. Not by this command. Not by me. Yemisi was released from the debrief at 0300. She should have gone to the medical bay. Should have submitted to the examinations and treatments that her body desperately needed. Instead, she found herself walking toward the water. The base harbor was quiet at this hour, the boats secured, the docks empty except for a single figure sitting at the end of the furthest pier. Creel looked up as she approached, unsurprised by her presence. Could not sleep either, he said. Too much thinking. He chuckled at the echo of their conversation from days earlier. She lowered herself onto the pier beside him, letting her legs dangle over the water that had become so central to her existence. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the harbor lights reflect off the gentle swells. Your father would be proud, Creel finally said. I hope you know that. I know. He was always worried about you. Back when you were young. Used to talk about it during deployments. Wondered if he was doing right by you, raising you around the water the way he did. Wondered if he was pushing you towards something or letting you find your own way. Yemisi touched the knife at her belt. What did you tell him? I told him that some people are born for the ocean, that you cannot make someone into a swimmer any more than you can make water flow uphill. Either it is in them or it is not. He nodded toward the harbor. It was in you from the day you were born. All he did was help you understand it. A small boat crossed the harbor in the distance, its running lights tracing a path through the darkness. Yemisi watched it pass and thought about all the water she had crossed to reach this moment. Admiral O'Yelleran mentioned programs that do not officially exist. I heard rumors, Creel admitted. Special units. The kind that recruit operators with unusual capabilities. The kind that might have use for someone who can disappear in the water like a ghost. Is that what you want from me? What I want does not matter. What matters is what you want. Yemisi considered the question. She had spent so long fighting for acceptance, for the right to prove herself, that she had rarely stopped to ask what came after. What did she want, now that she had demonstrated beyond all doubt that she belonged? I want to keep swimming, she said finally. I want to go where the water takes me. I want to save the people who cannot save themselves. Creel smiled, the expression carrying decades of shared understanding. Then, that is exactly what you will do. Dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon, pink and gold bleeding into the darkness. Yemisi watched the colors spread across the sky and felt something settle inside her. Not peace exactly. Peace was for people who had stopped moving. What she felt was purpose, direction, the certainty of a current that knew where it was going. The water lapped against the pier pilings, patient and eternal. She was ready for whatever came next. 6 weeks later, Yemisi stood at attention in a ceremony she had never expected to attend. The medal being pinned to her chest carried a classified citation, its true details known only to a handful of people with clearances that most of the military did not know existed. To the official record, she was being recognized for exceptional performance during a training exercise. To the people who mattered, She was being honored for the impossible. Rear Admiral O'Yelleran performed the pinning herself, her steady hands securing the decoration with practiced precision. The Admiral leaned close as she finished, her words pitched for Yemisi's ears alone. Your father received this same medal in 1997. Different operation. Same kind of courage. Yemisi blinked against the sudden pressure behind her eyes. She had not known. Her father had never spoken of his decorations, had kept that part of his life separate from the man who taught her to swim in red currents and hold her breath until her lungs burned. Thank you, ma'am. The Admiral stepped back, and the small audience offered restrained applause. Commander Thorne, Master Chief Creel, a handful of intelligence officers who had witnessed the debrief. And in the back row, 3 men whose presence meant more than any medal. Holt stood with Brennan and Castellano. All 3 recovered enough to attend. Castellano still moved carefully, his injuries healing, but not forgotten. Brennan's arm remained in a cast. Holt's face bore fading bruises that would become scars, permanent reminders of what had happened on that island. When the ceremony concluded, Holt approached her. His posture had changed in the weeks since the rescue. The rigid hostility replaced by something that resembled equilibrium. Chief Adeyemi, he said formally, congratulations. Thank you, Senior Chief. He hesitated, then spoke again. I submitted a revised assessment of your capabilities to command. It reflects my current understanding of your qualifications and potential. He paused. It also includes a recommendation that you be considered for any advanced programs seeking operators with exceptional aquatic skills. The admission cost him something. Yemisi could see the effort behind the words, the dismantling of beliefs he had carried for years. She chose to accept the gesture for what it was. I appreciate that, Senior Chief. Truly. Holt nodded once, the exchange complete, and returned to Brennan and Castellano. The 3 of them left together, a unit bonded by shared trauma and survival. Yemisi watched them go and felt the last remnants of old grievances dissolve into irrelevance. Creel appeared at her elbow, 2 cups of coffee in his weathered hands. He offered her one, and they moved to a quiet corner of the room. So he said, what did Admiral O'Yelleran offer you? A choice. Between? Yemisi sipped her coffee, organizing her thoughts. There's a program. Small unit, specialized missions, the kind of operations that require capabilities most people do not believe exist. They wanted to help build something new. A training pipeline for combat swimmers who can do what I do. The ghost trick, among other things. She looked at him directly. They wanted to find people like me. Train them. Create a capability that does not currently exist in any formal structure. Creel's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something like pride. And you said yes. I said I needed to think about it. She turned the coffee cup in her hands. My whole career, I've been fighting for the chance to prove myself. Fighting for missions, fighting for respect, fighting against people who decided I did not belong before I ever had the chance to show them otherwise. This would be different. This would be building something instead of fighting for scraps. Sounds like you have already decided. Maybe I have. The reception wound down, attendees filtering out in small groups, the formal atmosphere relaxing into quiet conversations. Yemisi excused herself and walked outside, seeking the fresh air and open sky that the conference room had denied her. The base spread before her, buildings and vehicles and personnel going about the business of military service. Beyond the perimeter, she could see the ocean, its surface glittering under the afternoon sun, endless and patient and full of secrets. She thought about her father, about the waters off Lagos where he had taught her to swim before she could walk, about the day the ocean had claimed him, taking him down into the darkness while strangers lived because of his sacrifice. She had spent years trying to understand that loss, trying to find meaning in the randomness of currents and riptides, and a heart too generous to let others drown. Now, finally she understood. Her father had not died because the ocean betrayed him. He had died because he was exactly who he had always been, a man who swam toward danger when others swam away. The water had not taken him. It had simply welcomed him home. Yemisi touched the knife at her belt, feeling the worn handle one last time. Then she unclasped it and held it in her palm, studying the blade that had traveled with her through black water and enemy fortresses and a long swim back to safety. She would keep it, would carry it always, a reminder of where she came from and who had made her. But she no longer needed it to feel close to him. He was in every current she navigated, every breath she held, every impossible distance she crossed. He was in her, had always been. The ocean called to her, as it always did, patient and eternal and full of promise. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character. Perhaps you know someone who proved every doubter wrong, or someone who showed hidden strength when it mattered most. We would love to hear your story. Chief Petty Officer Yemisi Adeyemi turned away from the water and walked toward her future. There were swimmers to find, skills to teach, a legacy to build. The black water had made her who she was. Now it was time to show others the way.